Have you ever met Miss Lindy? She's a gal with the bright red hair.
Well, welcome back to Victory Podcast, where we talk about all things life, small business, and of course, pie. I am Bailey, and I am here with the owner and founder of Victory Pie Company, Sheila Blue. Hi, Sheila.
Hi, Bailey.
Good to see you again. It's been a minute since we recorded, so I'm
Yes.
glad that we're jumping back on and able to do this. And hopefully, we will have video this time around because we're figuring it out.
Yeah.
This week, we are discussing how to get started from nothing, because we have a lot of young entrepreneurs who are following this podcast and they have big dreams about what it looks like to own a business or start a business, but they have no idea where to begin. And you have done that more than once,
Yes.
right?
Oh, yes.
Well, I know just from like ongoing conversations that you and I've had, and I've had the privilege of working for Victory Pie, doing marketing and such for years now, that you are like the business idea generator. Like, you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, have these amazing ideas, and I have no idea where you come up with them, but you could just do it all day long, and they're all good ideas. Like, you have big ideas, big dreams, and like, if you decided to pursue any of them, I think they would be successful. So how did you decide that Victory Pie Company was the business idea to pursue? Like, how did you land on one and then chase it?
Yeah, I always love this question. I'm like, but it's true. Lots of ideas, and I think, like you said, you can go. Maybe I could have gone with any of them and had the success. I don't know, but why I chose what I did and how. I think my number one answer is my why. Number one, what was my why? Why did I start the business? Why did I want the business? What was the business about? I think was the biggest one. And why did I pursue that field of hospitality? And I think even more than that too was, how did that fit into my life and lifestyle at the time as well, which was a big factor for me. I still had kids at home, was home and at the time, and homeschooling, and what did I do? How could I do what I wanted to do and still accomplish what I was already doing? Because for me personally, my business, I don't want to say fell into my lap, but it came out of the grief. It came out of the need to want to share my brother's story and name, after we lost him serving in Afghanistan. But because of that, it was like, I just have to do something. What is that something? And it's funny because I started that. So to encourage entrepreneurs, what it started out at is not what it ended up in. And so when I started out, that was my why. That was my reason. That never wavered. But what I started in, it morphed from what it began in to what it turned into. And at the end of it was that, chicken pot pie that he loved and the recipe. Well, I started out doing meal planning classes and telling people the story about it and showing them how to make it. And people just wanted it made for them. Could you just make it for me? That kind of a thing. And so I think the long answer to that question is, it was my why, but I let it kind of morph into what it was and grow into what it was, and let it, I failed forward is what I did. It didn't work out at first, to be honest. And that's an honest answer. It wasn't like, I've got this business, I made a business plan. This is horrible. I had no business plan. I was just like, I just want to tell people about my brother and give back to veterans. And so in doing that, it was my why. And my why is why I did that. And it was because of the connection that food was with my brother, the connection that particular pie and others were with my brother, the connection of time around the table, growing. It was the memory of all of it. And for me, that was my why. And I wanted it to succeed, because if it succeeded, it meant I could help other veterans, other families, other spouses and children who have lost a veteran parent or spouse.
Yeah.
And So it was always my why. Actually, that's what propelled me, and that's how I got started. And why it worked was the why. And I've learned a lot in business since I started, and I know a lot of people in business will tell you, all of them, you have to have a why. If your why isn't strong enough, your why isn't big enough, you're not gonna keep going. There's nothing to keep
Yeah.
going for. Something has to get you out of bed every day. Something has to make you want to do it when you don't want to do it, because you're gonna not
Yeah.
want to do it a lot. It's hard. It's really hard to be an entrepreneur. It's hard to go against the grain when everybody's telling you, I mean, really, give it up. It's not working. I had people tell me that. And
Yeah.
so in doing that, I think the biggest thing is your why, and my why is what drove me. My why is what kept me going, I think, for me. That was huge. It was everything, really. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, I think that we've talked about this before, but I think there's something to be said about taking the next natural step when you're faced with like a billion ideas or things that you could do.
Right.
It's kind of like take the one that feels the most in line with what you're about.
Right.
And because you knew, like, at the core of what you wanted to do, it was this: I want to honor my brother's life, and I want to connect with my brother after losing him, and I want to provide a way for the people around me who have also lost somebody to, as a first responder or as a vet. I want to make a way to do that. Like, Victory Pie lined up with that so significantly that it was natural. It was like, of
Yeah.
course, this will be the thing that I push toward. Would that be true?
Absolutely. And I think, too, to add to that, without, for fear of sounding arrogant, I knew that I had a great product. I knew, and
Yeah.
going out into restaurants or going out to other places, I knew that I made a great pie. I knew I made great food, and I knew I cared about locally sourcing things. I knew I cared about fresh. I knew that's how we cooked.
Yeah.
And that was something that mattered to me, even as much as
Yeah.
my why, excellence and work ethic and all those things mattered, and the product that
Yeah.
I supplied people with. And I think that was it. And I knew I could give them something as good or better than they were used to, time and
Yeah.
time and time and time again. And I think that
Yeah.
was the other thing, was like, but you haven't had it like this yet. Wait, and it was all fresh, and it was all done well, and it was all done by hand. And that, as much as my why, that was part of it. I did it so that you, and meaning the customer, could get the best, because I always
Yeah.
wanted to give my best. And I think that was part of it. That was definitely, my product was an excellent sourcing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I know it's hard to brag on yourself when you have a product like that, but as somebody on the outside, I will say, I got married last weekend, and gratefully I know Sheila, and so she did the pies. I had like a layered stack pie and then a bunch of mini pies, and she also did like a charcuterie spread for our wedding. And when I tell you that we had the best food that I have ever had because of that, like, we also had leftovers. We ate like kings. Like, for a week, we ate like kings. And
Awesome.
so I know you don't love bragging on yourself, but I will brag on you. Best pie in the country by far. Never had pie outside of the country, but I'm sure you give them a run for their money too.
Yeah.
So you definitely had a good product. Okay, but for the young entrepreneurs listening, the
Yeah.
young dreamers, and maybe that's young in age, like maybe they are, 18 years old, in their early 20s, and they really want to launch something, or maybe they're just young in experience.
Sure.
Maybe they just are launching something for the first time, and they're in their retirement doing that. Both
Right.
are scary, both feel young and new to it.
Yeah.
What is the first step? Maybe you have a great idea, you have a great product. What's the first step in getting that ball rolling?
Yeah. I think, for starters, you've got, take what you've got, a couple things, and that is, again, first and foremost, what's your why? Why do you want this thing to go out, this service or this product?
Yeah.
What do you want to do with it ultimately? And what do you want to gain from it? I think there's that. And then who needs it? So you've kind of got, what's your why? Because at the end of the day, you're the one hauling this business on your shoulders. You're the one that's going to put the time in. You're the one that's going to put in the work. You're the one that's going to lose the sleep. You're the one that's going to do the learning. So what's your why? And then after that, who needs it? Who needs this product? And I think that's huge. Or service, and why do they need it? And what's going to make you, why do they want yours? So even before like setting out this, logical plan of how to execute business, why would they want yours, and what makes yours better than the next guy's? And
Yeah.
I think that was a big part of it. And that's one of the things I will say that I took a lot of pride in, was I knew, because that's where your confidence lies too as a young entrepreneur, and your value. And here's why: because when you start, everybody's going to be like, why should I buy yours? Like, why? How much is your pie? What is that? And it was like, with confidence, hey, we might not be for everybody, but here's why: because I use only fresh ingredients. I locally source my food. I do this. Everything's made by hand. Everything is done. That was my story. But what is yours? Your service or your product? What is, how is it made? What sets you apart, and who is it for? And if it's for a niche, market of people, what problem is it going to solve? The bigger the problem you solve, the more valuable of a thing you have, and the more money you make, and the more you succeed. So what problem is your product or service solving? I think that's a great place to start, and really think that through, because I really had to, because even pie, it sounds simple, but even with like pie, it was like, who's your demographic? Well, everybody eats pie. But not really. I mean, there kind of was a couple demographics, and it was also, pie is sort of this, grandmas make pie, and everybody associates pie with grandma. Well, I'm not, well, technically I'm a grandma now, but not when I started. But I like to think of myself as the young, cool grandma, but it's like, pie also can have this, let's make it relevant to today. And again, local, fresh, all the things, seasonal. So kind of having the best of both of those. So I took that and was like, okay, and that's how I did it. So who's going to see it, and why would my pie be better than everybody else's pie? So it's your thing. What are those? Yeah. I think that's the best place to really start. And that's a big part of it.
It's interesting. In talking to like girls who are younger than me, who are like entering into the dating world, they, have options. There's like all these different people who they could go on dates on. And something that I have recommended to them from personal experience is, when you start to date, take yourself on a date. For every date that you agree to go on with somebody else, go on a date with you by yourself, and ask yourself the same questions that you are going to ask on a date. So the questions like, what do you do for a living? What's your dream? Do you have a 5-year plan? Whatever, I don't know, whatever people ask when they're going on a dates. What do you like to do for fun?
Right.
Do you even know the answers to those yourself? And I think as a young entrepreneur, it's the same concept of like, get to know the business that you want to create. And
Absolutely.
I like, as a marketer or as a branding designer, I ask that list of questions of, what problem are you solving for your ideal client? What does an ideal client look like? What age are they? What gender are they? What race are they? Where do they live? What do they do for fun? Like, answer those questions about your business. And that will give you the groundwork for what you're creating. I think those are really good prompts.
That's huge. That's really good advice. I think another thing too along those lines is, if you have an opportunity, and I would just say, be honest, but if you have an opportunity to work for somebody, or work in the field, or work in the industry that you're looking to create something in, not like, I'm going to go to my direct competition, but but I mean, and restaurants, everybody eats. I never saw that as competition, because everybody eats. But if you have an opportunity to go and learn from somebody, and a lot of people do like to share, some don't, and that's okay, then don't learn from them. But find somebody who does want to. And if you have an opportunity to even, and I'll say this, even offer your services for a short amount of time, like go and apprentice. If it was me doing it over again, I would have gone into, a restaurant or a bakery and said, hey, can I work for you for 3 or 4 weeks and learn how you do this? I would like to do this someday, and I've never done it before, and I kind of like to see what it really takes to do this. And even for free, and or maybe for some small compensation, or for trade for something, or whatever it is, because it's invaluable. It's priceless what you could learn if you have that opportunity. Because it's really easy to walk into a place and say, you know, employees, and I've had this happen even when I was an employer. I do everything for her. She doesn't, this place wouldn't run without me. You know, she needs,
Yeah.
it's like, that's real easy to think that. And, and hopefully your employer values you. It's really easy to think that, but I think we don't realize what it takes to run the whole machine. And not only what it takes to run the whole machine, but that as an employee, you're coming into that one spot. You didn't have to build all the spots. You didn't have to run the whole machine and build all the spots so that other people could go and do those each thing. You know, I worked everything from the dishwasher to the owner, you know, the handshaker to all of it. So if you have that opportunity, take it for what it's worth, because you can learn a lot. And even if it's not in maybe exact industry, or you want a version of it, figure that out, or learn from somebody, or take, you know, whatever you can learn, find somebody to learn that from. I think it would be huge.
I love that.
And
Wow.
and ask the good questions. What's the part that nobody sees? Because everybody likes to be like, hi, I'm making coffees and it's fun and talking to customers, but nobody sees the grind in the back. My husband used to describe it really well to customers. He's like, this place is so cute, I'd love to work here. And he's like, we're like a duck on water. You're seeing the duck on top. If you open those back doors, their feet, everybody back there is doing like this. And I love that was his analogy, because it couldn't be truer. So, you know, find somebody and say, hey, can I see what's going on underwater? You know, because that's the real life of an entrepreneur, not just what's in the front. So, yeah.
That's I feel like it's a lost art of like humility. Like, as an entrepreneur, if you want to start a business, you need to get schooled in the art of being humble and learning. And I think I could see apprenticeships making a way back, like in trade schools making their way back into the mainstream, because like, what a invaluable way to learn how to do something. But you do have to get humble. You do have to go and say, I don't know. Will you teach me? And like, I'm willing to work for this. And that might mean you're working, you know, you got to work a full-time job to pay your bills. And I get that. And also, if you want to start a business, you got to go add a part-time gig on top of what you're doing just to learn, because you're not going to get paid from doing it. You're just learning. But like, that is invaluable. I mean, that would change everything.
Absolutely.
That would change everything. And I think, like, you know, it's become popularized again to think that that the lowest working employee in a business should own the company. But really, the person who owns the company is the person who's incurred all the risk for the company. Like, they've invested they don't work 40 hours a week. No. They work every hour of the week, because that's what it looks like to run a business.
They don't get to drive out of the parking lot and it's over. There again, which goes back to what you just said, which is great, because when you're an entrepreneur, you don't work your company and then go home and turn on the TV and kick back. No, now there's more to do, because there's payroll, there's buying, there's all the admin, there's all the things, there's the licensing, there's lots of stuff that goes on with that, hiring, firing, whatever, you know, even menu creation if you're in the food industry, other things like that. And so to start out and have a full-time job and see what that feels like, it's a really good indicator of what entrepreneurship is like. Because it is how it feels, and it's a real thing. I mean, and if you can get with somebody in your industry, a lot of people I have found, and I know I was one, would love to help you. I would love to help anybody save them a field trip if I can, and say, man, if you can set it up like this from the get-go, do this, and you won't spend all this time wasting learning that, you know? And if you'll be humble and listen and execute instead of going, I think I know what I'm doing. Well, are you the one with the restaurant, or are they? Who, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, I did that, and I listened, and I said, well, they're the one succeeding right now. So it can't hurt to try what they're saying, because they're doing it. So let me try that first and see if it works before I try my way, because I haven't done it yet. And so as many people as I could find that answer from, I did. And a lot, good people, not all are willing to, but there's good people who are willing to let you come in and do that. And they will share with you, and they will tell you the truth, and they will help you, you know? outside of sharing their secret sauce. You know, nobody's going to do that, but they will
Sure.
definitely tell you, you know, help you. Yeah.
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 Okay, so you started Victory Pie, really Meal Masters back then,
Yeah.
but you started Victory Pie back in 2012. Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So over a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got over a decade of owning and running a business under your belt. What do you feel like is one of the bigger mistakes that you made in the early years?
Ooh. I think the biggest mistake was honestly not knowing the value of my time. Not knowing the value of my time and the real cost of it and what that looked like. And I'll explain that. So, and that could be twofold because I've seen both sides of that coin. And that is, you know, going into it, lots of personality types, you know, entrepreneurs. And sometimes we don't know how to price our service or our product, whatever that is.
Sure.
And so we kind of go in and we almost apologize, like, it's this much. And people are like, okay. And maybe even especially friends, you know, and you start to go, oh, maybe I'm asking you, you know, there's that conflict.
Yeah.
I find that that's what a lot of young entrepreneurs, they don't know how to price. But when we sit down, and I've sat down specifically more with a lot of bakers, people who want to start their own baking, you know, companies. And that
Yeah.
is, but know the value of your time. And I'll ask, you know, what are you pricing your product at? And they'll say, and I'll be like, ooh, like that's way too low. And they're like, well, no, it only costs this to make. Okay, but how long does it take you to make that? Oh, like let's look at how long that costs, how rising bread. And then this is the other thing when you're thinking about your market of people. And I'll just use food industry right now because that's my wheelhouse. But it can translate to any business, any product, any service. And that is, so sure, maybe a loaf of bread only costs you $3 ingredients, right? Let's say $3 ingredients. But you have to keep the sourdough starter growing every single day. You have to monitor it. And then you make the sourdough. Sourdough, you know, it's hot right now, so, you know, it's a hot commodity. And it's a lot of work. Double proofing, watching, doing. I'm like, how much time does that take you? And then the proof, then the bake, then the cool up. And it was like, oh, well, it's 7 hours by the time I'm,
Yeah.
That's more than
Yeah.
that's more than a $5 loaf of bread. And the reason it's $5 at the grocery store is because a machine's doing it and it's mass produced. And
Right.
if you look at the ingredient label, I'm not dogging stores. If you look at the ingredient label, there's about 27 more ingredients than the one that your home baker makes. There's probably
Yeah.
4 in your sourdough from a home baker,
Yeah.
you know, or somebody in a farmer's market or whatever that is. And you just traded quality for time. So that's what you as an entrepreneur in your marketing, in your branding, and I know you know this better than me, but in everything that you do and what you stand for and your confidence and your product, it has to say that in everything you do. And you have to have your confidence in that. And when I started out, it was funny. When I started out with the meal planning and then went into the catering and the personal chefing, I didn't have that confidence. By the time I got to Victory Pie and my pie, and I had already done that for so many years, like that one particular product. I had done a lot of things in the food industry, but I knew that product like the back of my hand. I've been making that pot pie since I was 12 years old, and I knew it like the back of my hand. I could do it in my sleep. So not only did I have the confidence, I knew my sources, I knew my stuff. So when people were like, how much is it for a pot pie? I was like, oh yeah, it's this. Because we use fresh ingredient. There's a pound of chicken and a pound of fresh vegetables in every pie, and you got this and that. Would you like it or not? I mean, it's that simple.
And it's so good.
There's that.
It's so good. Your chicken pot pie. Wow.
And so you have to know. Now, the flip side of that coin I've seen, I've gone to places where people are asking, you know, $30 for a loaf of bread. And it's like, because my bread is, it's like, let's be realistic here. You know,
Yeah.
I get that your time is valuable, but we need to be real careful, especially in this economy, that, you know, I know minimum wage has gone up, you know, I got be real careful how I
Right.
say this, but, you know, yes, the value of your time is valuable, but you also have to, it has to be worth the customer's dollar, you know, and we have
Yeah.
to be realistic in that too. But I think when you have a superior product and you know that you do, and you have to know your time, so you have to be ready for a no. And while I would say that was my biggest mistake in the beginning, it became my greatest asset when I got to Victory Pie. And I believe this is why I succeeded by the time I got there. And that was, I needed 99 no's to get to one yes. And I had gotten to a place where no didn't bother me. And I wasn't afraid of a no. I was like, no, okay, thanks. I need 98 more now so I can get my yes. And that's okay. And that was me schluffing at a farmer's market, right? You know, and giving out samples. But I think it's so important that you go into it being prepared for no, being okay with no, knowing the value of your time, really knowing the value of your product. A lot of people don't know the value of their product and they make a guess. And my biggest mistake was that in my time. So if you're creating something, whether it's a service or a product, what does it take?
Yeah.
So, and don't forget the little things like, you know, if you're giving it to them in a bag with a tag and a ribbon, all of that adds up, and add that to your cost. Don't forget that that's part of the cost. I could hand them a pie in a brown paper sack and charge them $5, or I could charge them $6 and hand it to them in a beautiful case with a label and a bow and the ingredients, and it looks like a gift. You know, how you have to account for all that. So, you know, and that's part of what you do. So there is that. So know the value of your time and what your product actually costs to make so that you price it well, and the value of your time. And when I say the value of your time, also, as you become an entrepreneur, you're going to be the one doing everything. You just are, right? You start out and that's how you're making your money, and you start and you can reinvest back into your own company. But you're going to get to a place, hopefully, where you might need some help. Like maybe you make all the bread loaves, but now you need somebody to help you bag them and label them and slice them or something, because it's more work because you're so busy making these. Well, you want to make sure that in the beginning you're pricing knowing that, you know, what that's going to look like. But also, when you're doing that, you know, what things can you let go of that somebody else can do that you can't? So when I say the value of your time, there's going to be certain things in your business as you grow only you can do. Only you can do. And you need to be willing to let go of and duplicate and hand off, and they have to be duplicatable, the other things to other people, because it's more valuable. So let's say you get to a place where your time is $50 an hour. We'll just use an even number, right? Let's say in the restaurant, and it's like, okay, so I could either spend my time, you know, putting it into that, making something that anybody could make if they could follow a recipe, or I could put it into my branding and my customer service, or vendor contacts and making sure I was getting the best locally sourced products with my vendors, and I was making good relationships. That's where my time was best spent, because once I had those good relationships and those great products and excellent to make our stuff with, I could teach other people to make it.
Yeah.
And it was worth, you know, maybe they were 20 an hour and I'm 50. Well, that now helps the customer not have to pay that much. You know, it's all economics. But But I say that, and that sounds like that's a lot for, you know, somebody at a farmer's market. No, it's not. That's what I thought. You know, I started with 12 pies, literally 12 pies. And it turned into, I laugh because I say an empire, you know, PIE. But but it did. And so know the value of your time and charge for it, and don't apologize for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I started my marketing business, the amount of research that you do at the beginning of starting a business is obscene, and the amount of training that you get, like, partly, you know, the reason that people pay me to build a logo for them or build a brand for them or whatever is partly because of taste that is just built in. Part of the reason that you're good at the pies that you make is because you know what tastes good, you know what flavors go together, and that's learned over a lifetime. But also the amount of hours that you have spent rolling out dough and perfecting how thick it needs to be, and exactly what ingredients to add, and how long to put that in the oven, at what temperature, and at what rack in the oven it needs to go. You know, the amount of time that I've spent learning design it's countless. I mean, it has been years and years and years of education. And so that's part of what people are paying for. You know, they're not just paying, you think it's easy because you're doing it. And so I know a lot of people price their stuff lower because to me, building a logo, maybe it only takes me some hours.
Right.
But it would take anybody else who doesn't have the education or the research or the experience that I have doing it. It would take them so much longer to come up with the same product. And so it's, you see people, you'll walk through a farmer's market and maybe you'll see like a really cool wooden bench or something. And it's priced at something that you think is obscene. That's like $300. And you're like, I could make that.
Yeah.
And in reality, you probably could. You probably could if you invested in the tools, if you learned how to woodwork, if you learned what woods look best. I mean, if you went and purchased all those materials and then did trial and error, you could probably make it. You could probably figure out how to build that bench yourself. But that person already did, and that's what you're paying for.
And by the time you do that, your bench was about $1,500, not $300.
Right.
So
At least,
that's where you save your money. And you're absolutely right, which is why, when I started out, look, I would like go way back in the Instagrams and Facebook, and you'll see when Sheila was in charge of marketing and branding and social media before Bailey showed up. But it's true, and that wasn't my strength. And so I knew, though, one of the first things I needed to hand off was that. But what that also allowed me to do was go, okay, so the time I was doing with that, now I can do what I know how to do and make more pies that brings in more money to pay Bailey to do what Bailey knows how to do. And that's when it really clicked, like, okay, now, find the people that are doing the things you can't and get them on your team and support them and do that well. And that's what and learn the value of your time and know going in, what things do you know how to do? And at first you're going to do it all. And I think that's great. The best advice I ever got was from a friend who's an incredible businesswoman. And she said, work every aspect of your business before you ever hire anybody, so you know what to expect from them and how long it really takes and what you expect from the job. And that's what I did. And I think that was some of the best advice I ever got, and I would tell anybody starting a business that.
Yeah, wow, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So we know that, over the last decade plus of you running this business, you've had some massive victories, no pun intended. You've also had, failures and bad days and days that it just felt like, why am I doing this? What am I doing? Why do I keep going? What was something, or what was the thing that kept you anchored and kept you moving forward even on the worst days?
It was that why. And in particular, sometimes I can tell these stories with my brother, and sometimes I get choked up. So I might get a little choked up on this one. But I remember, because, you have to push as an entrepreneur, you're exhausted. I was just even building it and working and taking all the orders I could take and doing all the things I could do. It was just a lot of hours, and you don't want to say no to anybody in the beginning, because you want to take everything because you're growing. And it was hard, and you're tired and you're exhausted. And there was days I was just like, oh, I don't know if this is worth it. I don't know if I want to do it. And for me personally, because my why was my why, it always took me back. There was a particular time, about a month or so actually before my brother was killed. We were at the table in my living room. My sister-in-law was there. My nephew, she was, pregnant with my niece at the time. And my brother was on a Skype call, and we were all talking, and he was there, and he looked stressed out, and he was, my brother was a pretty relaxed guy for the most part, but you could see the stress on his face and what he was doing and things. But we just had a conversation, and he was telling us what he had to do and some of what was going on. And I won't share it, but it wasn't pleasant and it wasn't good, and the things they were, had to do. And and then not long after that, a month later, he was killed. And I went, I would always go back to that on tough days, honestly. And I remember what he told me he had to do, what he was doing daily to serve our country and to serve others. And I thought to myself, if he can do that, I can get up today and go to work. I can get up today and I can go do that. And, I'm a woman in a country that gives jobs to other people. I create other people's livings because I get up and go in there every day. And my brother and so many others made so many sacrifices so I could be a woman doing that today. And that literally is what got me out of bed. I'm like,
Wow.
I can get up. And it made the load so much lighter. It put it in perspective for me. That was what got me out of bed every day. And that's why I say, whatever your why is, and listen, it could be you grew up in poverty and you want more for your life and you want more for yourself and you have a goal and you want to build a legacy, or there's something, it doesn't matter what it is. It could even be, I had young kids that came to me and they just wanted to buy a car. That is awesome. That's your goal. That's why you got a job. That's great. And you know what? I watched them save their pennies working for me and buy a car. And we all celebrated when they drove up in their new car. I mean, it was great. So whatever your why, that's why your why has to be big enough, especially as an entrepreneur, because everything's against you. It's hard. It's not easy. And the grind is real and it grinds on you. And if you don't have a reason big enough to overcome it, you won't. And that's why a lot of people don't make it. That's why a lot of businesses don't. You know, you read all the books, you listen to all the podcasts, and they tell you all the statistics, and especially in the food industry, it's even higher. And it's like, you know what? If you don't have something to overcome that, you won't. It's that simple. So whatever that is, it's got to drive you. And that for me is what drove me. And I wanted, you know, I was honestly working out my grief, and I wanted my brother to be proud, and I didn't want it to be in vain. And I had a platform. I was building a platform to get to share my story. You know, when a lot of people lose somebody, I have found this a lot. And in the restaurant, and we've had lots of customers who have lost people in their lives, and you just want to have a reason to tell the story. You want to have a reason to bring up their name in a conversation, you know, all the things to keep them going. And for me, this was an opportunity to keep them and servicemen and women and first responders like them to keep their stories and their names going. And it was the platform for that. That was, so it was like, if I keep this going, I get to keep doing that. And that to me was a big deal. That was everything. That was my why.
Wow. Wow, that's beautiful. I mean, I think like the reality is that life is difficult, right? Like life is hard. And so you get to kind of pick your hard in this. You know, being poor and pursuing a dead end job that you don't care about and just getting up and going through the motions, that's hard.
Yeah.
That is hard stuff. Like that is not a good time.
No.
It's difficult for sure. And starting a business or following a dream or taking a big giant risk,
Yes.
that's hard. Like
Very.
it's hard work.
Yeah.
So pick your hard. Are you going to pick your hard and stay, you know, laying down and just let life happen to you? Or are you going to get up and go do something about it?
Yeah.
And that's what you did with Victory Pie. It was like, I'm going to do something with this grief I've been given.
Yeah.
And it kept you going. Like it kept you anchored, but it also was the wind in your sails throughout the entire thing.
Absolutely.
It still is. I love that. Like, you know, before I worked for you, I knew about you because you had the best food in town. And the story of your brother is so central to Victory Pie and has stayed so central throughout all the phases. I really love that, you know, when you were working out of the farmer's market and just selling pies, and then when you opened a cafe and were doing breakfast, lunch, coffee, and then when you moved to more of a catering thing, when you opened a second location, when you started shipping, when you started a podcast, like the story of Mark has stayed right at the middle of everything you do. And I love that you've kept this focus on honoring those who have sacrificed for us. I just think that that's really beautiful, and it's stayed really central. I think that's really cool. You mentioned that, like, you know, part of that is that you have this privilege of being a woman in America and being able to run a business. You know, that privilege is not allotted to every woman in the world, for sure. Running a business, much less being treated like a person, is not allotted to every woman in the world. And so that's a massive privilege, and it's amazing that you get to do that. I'm glad that, like, I'm so grateful to be in that boat too, where we get to, you know, run and own businesses like we do. But a question I have will be like, there are, I think, struggles that are unique to being a woman in the marketplace and a woman entrepreneur. And so I'm curious what your perspective of that is. what have been some unique struggles for you in that?
Yeah, definitely has been. I think one of the biggest, just historically, the food industry, was male dominated for a lot of years. I mean, Julia Child's one of our big, she opened a lot of
Yeah.
doors for women in the food industry. I used to watch her
Sure.
show when I was a kid on PBS. Um, but, and that's opened up. And I think too, some of that is because of the grind that it is, specifically in the food industry. It's not, you can't just go punch a clock when you own a restaurant. Like go in part time. There's no such thing as part time, and full time. And for myself, being a woman, and being married and having children, in addition to all that,
Yeah.
was another layer for me. And how do you balance that? Just like all women who work outside the home, but in this industry, I don't want to say there's no hours. It's different. It's not a 9 to 5 thing. It's not like an office job where a business shuts down. And so I think that was a big part of it, and people understanding. For me, specifically in Victory Pie, was kind of funny in the beginning that it was mine, that it was owned by me. Right when I started on the restaurant side, because I had done the farmers market, my mom had passed actually, and my dad had come in to start helping me, in those early years. And it was kind of amazing to me how many people assumed it was my dad's restaurant and
Wow.
thought it was his, and were like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's so nice that you work with your dad." And I was like, "No,
Wait.
actually, it's me."
Yeah.
But it was so funny that they just kind of, it was a gift that they thought it was. And I don't know how much of that was maybe because it was pies. And again, pies had that kind of grandma connotation to it, something older, that they were mine. But I think one of the biggest struggles, has been that. And I think the other part with that is, me personally, I don't know about other women, but I know this, about me. I didn't want to be a boss, an employer, a person who, ruled with an iron fist. You see a lot of that in the food industry too. I mean, we all love to make, see the memes on Gordon Ramsay and the jokes, the idiot
Yeah.
sandwich. We used to make those jokes in the back and all the things. And I think what made me unique as a woman, and this goes back to my education and history, my education and degree is in the legal field, believe it or not. Worked in the legal field for years and stuff before I stayed home. And I saw that was a male dominated field too in the early 90s and things. But you had to go above and beyond. You had to work twice as hard to prove yourself as a woman. There was all the things. And I happened to stay home and raise my kids in the interim. So doing this, what I decided as a woman in business is I wanted to bring a different culture to my business. And I didn't
Yeah.
want to I didn't want to be a, boss babe, but I wasn't going to grind. And I don't feel necessary to compete with men. I'm not one. I don't have to compete
Yeah.
with men. I'm different. That makes me unique, and I'm going to be proud of it, and I'm going to bring something different to the workplace because of it.
Yeah.
And me having had the opportunity to raise 3 young men,
Yeah.
was huge for me. So when I went into that, it allowed me to have, empathy, understanding, but also expectation and other things on a level of having been a mother and a wife, and now an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. So I think I brought a whole different perspective. Actually,
For sure.
we had what I called a different culture. A lot of people say, "Oh, we're like a family here." And yeah, it wasn't even that. We had a culture of honor, respect. There wasn't a lot of, not that we had none, but there wasn't, the drama, the backbiting, a lot of stuff, especially that goes on in the food industry. There wasn't
Yeah.
that competition, that undermining, that gossip. If there was, it was immediately
Shut down.
shut down and done away with. I literally had people that worked there 3 hours. We're not doing that. Like
Yeah.
it was a culture, and that was a standard that I decided to set. And I'm not saying that men wouldn't or whatever, but I think that I had a unique perspective and a unique opportunity as a woman to bring that because of the background I had and what I brought to the
Yeah.
table. And I wanted to be, it's funny because after COVID and all these things that happened, we thrived in COVID and our community was great. But as people started to say, "Oh, that's great, your employer cares about you and cares that you're sick," we already were. I'm like, I already was
Yeah.
doing that. It's like,
Yeah.
I cared that your kid was sick today and you needed to take care of them. That's okay. Hey, we'll make it up, but be here for your fellow employee tomorrow when they might have to be out, or
Yeah.
we just were really honest about the culture of what we did in that. And I think as a woman that brought something unique to the table. I really do.
Yeah.
Just because in the world I've been in now, I've met many men in this industry that are restaurant owners locally. They're great men. They're highly successful. And maybe it didn't make me as much money, but it made me a really good employer. And you know what? I set out to be different and do something different, and I feel good
Yeah.
about that.
And you
And
did it. Yeah.
yeah. I didn't want to go through people like not good enough next, not good enough next. I wanted to be in an environment where somebody could be cultivated, where maybe you might be working through something, or this might be a hard time for you or something. You can still work here. We can still work together, and it's a safe place to kind of go through life and have a
Yeah.
job. And that's where I think the mom side of things I brought in that was unique. And
Yeah.
again, maybe it didn't make as much money, but I don't care. At the end of the day, honestly, it doesn't matter to
Yeah.
me. Did it create success in other people's lives? Did it give something good for them to take with them that they could take forever and take into their next job and into their forever? If that's what it did, I'm on board all day.
Yeah, I love that. Wow. I mean, I think we're going to do a podcast here in the future about celebrating the difference between men and women in entrepreneurship. And because I think it's really popular, Sheila, you brought this up the other day, that it's really popular culturally to just knock the people around us. If you're a woman, to just dog on men all the time and how terrible they are. And then similarly for men to do the same toward women as entrepreneurs. But I think what you just said, that you bring unique skills. I don't think it's wrong to say men and women are different. They're good at different things, and they bring unique gifts to the workplace that make different cultures. And so I love that. And again, I've had the privilege of working for you, and I've seen those things at play. I've worked for a million men, and I've worked for a couple of women, you being one of them. And there are unique gifts that come from you being a woman and an entrepreneur at the same time. I think that's rad. Okay, so last question. What is a parting word of encouragement for the budding entrepreneurs that are listening, or the business owner who maybe feels like they're failing?
Don't quit. I know that sounds simple, but don't quit.
Yeah.
You're failing forward. It's okay. You're doing it right if you're failing. You can't get something right the first time. And if you don't fail, you can't learn what doesn't work. So keep failing forward. Just keep doing it. If that didn't work, don't sit there and hang on it. Move on to the next thing. And I like to tell people, when kids are learning to walk, you don't see a 1-year-old fall down and go, that's it. Never using my legs again. This is over. They don't do that. They get right back up. And they try again, they fall again, they get back up and they fall again, and eventually they walk, they run, they go. And I think as entrepreneurs, we need to remember that simplicity of childhood, that, they get back up. And if they fall and hurt themselves, sometimes you get hurt in entrepreneurship. You lose money, you lose something. But you know what? Brush it off. Okay, cry about it for a minute. You're okay. And then go again. And now you know what not to do. So now do something different. Don't do the same thing. That's the thing. Learn from the failure. Keep failing forward. And I would say if you're already even in it and you're like, it's just not taking off, it's just not going, it's not going anywhere, I would say this too, is take a look at your product or your service. What isn't working about it? And if you've had clients or you've had some success with it, ask them, or even the people who have said no. If you've tried to sell something and everybody's telling you no, humble yourself. Like you said earlier, call them all back and say, hey, I just want to ask you, why not? What's keeping you from saying yes? And get the answer. That it's hard to hear, but don't guess. I mean, take it and hone it. And if they're saying too expensive, well, maybe you can find a better way to do it. Or if they're saying it's just not for me, or I don't really use that, well, maybe it doesn't meet a need like you think it does, or maybe it's something else. So really just look at it and keep going after it. And you might have to do a different version of it. Again, when I started with meal planning. Meal planning turned into cooking classes into catering, private chef jobs, cooking demonstration. I mean, it went from there to there to there to there to there to a chicken pot pie in a farmer's market to a restaurant. Ta-da! I mean, so it morphed, and it was like it worked for a little bit, but people weren't quite getting it, and it was like I was kind of beating my head against the wall. So if you feel like that, take a look at it and ask questions. Ask the people who aren't buying it. Hey, that's no problem. No, can I ask you what you would need to say? Yeah, I'm just trying to learn. What is it for you that isn't working with this? And just be honest. They'll be honest. Say,
Yeah.
you're actually really helping me. I did this in the beginning too. People would come in and say, I didn't want to tell you that didn't taste good. I said, please tell me. Always tell me if something's not right. I can't make it better. I can't fix something if I don't know it's broken. So if something's not working in your business, ask people. And don't ask your friend, your girlfriend who's going to say, it's amazing. I don't know what everybody's problem. Don't ask her. She'll tell you, yeah. Ask the people who are saying no. And that's the hard part, but that's gonna help you grow it. And don't quit. That's all I can say.
Come on. Amen. Well, I'll end us with a quote from Jeff Bezos, who obviously started Amazon, but and obviously he's crushed it in the entrepreneur game.
Big time.
But he said that I knew that if I failed, I would never regret that, but I would regret if I didn't try. And so get up, do it again. And if you fail, that's okay. Don't regret that. Regret the not doing it.
Absolutely.
Sheila, thank you so much for your words of wisdom. It is always a pleasure. And I will say to our listeners, there's going to be a link in the show notes below, also in our Instagram bio, to book a consultation with Miss Sheila Blue. If you are a young entrepreneur, she is offering, just for a limited time, she's offering free 15-minute consultations. We'll send you a questionnaire. You fill out some questions. It's a really good time to sit back and kind of reflect on what it is that you're either wanting to do or doing with this new business of yours. You'll answer those questions, and then you'll get a phone call consultation with Sheila where she can really help flush out some of those ideas. And I will just say, I started my business, my marketing business, years after Sheila had started Victory Pie, and my time with her has been invaluable. So if you are just getting started, book that free consultation. I promise it's 15 minutes of your time, and you will not regret it. Y'all have a great day. Thanks for listening in.
Thank you.
Just rock and roll it, take it